This week in our startup articles and discussion, Wall Street Journal's best-selling author shares 6 secrets to starting smart. Why entrepreneurs need to keep their business focused, 5 steps of successful customer journey mapping, a startup's guide to protecting trade secrets, bottle breacher. I'm so excited about this story. We're going to talk about that in their Google marketing campaign. You need to know what your customers value, for sure. Then we're going to take a short break, and since there is no interview, we're going to jump right into startup and security notes of interest. Crypto.co, Netscope, Illumio, YubiKey, Cybele Angel are in the headlines this week. Michael and I will talk about our journeys, as always, all that and more, on this episode of Startup Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Startup Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Stream over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand. Premium annual memberships include all video content, as well as access to virtual labs and the Q&A forums. You'd pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year, but we have a special offer for our listeners. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your active subscription, visit itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS30. Welcome everyone to Startup Security Weekly. This is episode 43. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined on the lines via Skype by the still beach bum himself, Mr. Michael Santarcangelo.
It's shiny outside again today. It was raining all week here, and so now it's bright. The sun is out. It's time for a weekend. Everything is good.
It's awesome. So I do have a couple of announcements. Let's see. My prompter is slow. It's slow today. You know, it's nice out. I think it wants to go outside. ITPro.tv's courses now include computer hacking, forensic investigator V9, Kali Linux, CompTIA A+ 901, and accelerated CompTIA Security Plus. Premium annual memberships include all video content, as well as access to virtual labs and Q&A forums. For a limited time, get 30% off monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription using the code SS30. All righty, Michael. What are we talking about today?
We're going to have a theme, and it's interesting because sometimes I put these themes together intentionally, and sometimes they just tend to kind of develop on their own. And when I was going back through what I picked out, I went, whoa, there's some themes here. Or if not, there are to me. So we'll have a theme as we go through it. So the first one, I know a bunch of folks have reached out to us, and I always love these emails and get into these conversations. And they said, listen, you guys cover startups. It's great. It just as a quick refresher, we definitely look at the money side of things in the investment, and we've got more coming up on that as we near 1 year of the program. We're going to keep upgrading and focusing on that better. We work on, of course, the startups and what that's like, and then we take a look at what's happening, in the landscape, the security landscape. If you think about it, a lot of what we're doing is the innovation, and we're showcasing a lot of that innovation that our industry is hungry for. But we also get a number of folks who reach out and say, this is great, and I just kind of want to start more of a lifestyle business. This is great, and I don't want to be a big funded startup. I don't want to be the next unicorn, and that's why every now and then we bring up articles that talk about just getting to your first $1,000, just setting up something basic and living a different life and providing value to people and doing a good job on what you're doing. This article is kind of along those lines, and a little bit is geared more towards consumers. But basically what they're talking about is if you're going to start up and you're going to start up smart, and it's a book, and I have not read the book. The book is called Launch Your Dream, a 30-day plan for turning your passion into your profession. But what it's talking about here is to start smart, it basically means what will get your customers to take action. All right, so we know I love to ask the question, what problem are you trying to solve? And this is taking that a little bit further, and it's saying, look, you want somebody, you're going to go out there, you're going to do it. You want them to click a link, you want them to give you an email address, you want them to download something. But let's boil it right down to they need to pay you in order to provide value for them. And related to this, I had a really good conversation today with somebody, and we're talking about the difference between value proposition and profitability. Value proposition is when I'm going to help you solve a problem that you have and create value in the process. And as we'll be able to go into this over the course of the next year, when you've got a good value proposition, that's your guiding star. It lets you clarify your focus. It prioritizes your efforts. It confidently guides your execution because you know the value that you're going to create and how you're going to do it. You can run a business and be profitable and, frankly, not really create a lot of value. Now, you can argue that, well, you're creating value because you're solving a problem and they're giving you money for it. Sure. But that's not always creating value, right? That's just more of an exchange. And what this is talking about in this article is you want people to take an action. You want them to get excited about what you're doing. You want them to feel connected to it. You should build it into it. And I think that's a great idea. And it doesn't matter whether you're working with consumers or businesses because you're still working with people. It doesn't matter whether you're doing this as yourself hanging out a shingle trying to lead a different lifestyle. You're building a team. You're building it all matters. And so just to go through some of the headlines, it talks about people move when they feel excited. They move when they feel affection. They move when they feel obligated, although I'd be careful with that one. They move when they feel invested. They move when they feel comfortable. They move when they feel exclusive. Also, be careful with that one. The two I said be careful on. There's a lot happening right now in terms of scarcity and obligation, what we call reciprocity. There's a lot of people misusing it. It's like they read an article on it one time and say, oh, I got it. I'll create scarcity. I don't recommend that. I don't think that's a great strategy for how to do these types of things. But so, when we go through the rest of it, what it's really saying is, can you answer these questions? Can you build these into your process? And what I would say is if you can't, you need to. This is where it all starts right here. So I thought it was actually a pretty good summary of a lot of the stuff. And if you're looking to think about it, you're thinking about doing it, or you're in a situation right now in your startup, you're not getting some of the traction you want, go back and think through some of these questions and say, how are we doing that? And I think you're going to get a lot from it.
I want to go back to something you said, Michael, about prioritizing, your features and the value that you deliver, or really your features to help provide that value. I think that can be applied also to internal projects, and I've been focused recently on an internal project for Security Weekly, and it has some ties to offensive countermeasures as well. And if you, let's say, develop a solution in-house, that could be a process, that could be software, or whatever, you have to prioritize improvements and features on that. And I think understanding what the value is of that, even to you internally, is an important exercise to go through. I think it's kind of that startup mentality that we talk about being incorporated into other organizations. So I'm definitely, took some mental notes on that about how you prioritize your internal tasks as well, because that's important. I mean, your house has to be in order if you're going to provide value to your customers.
Yeah, and that starts with yourself, right? There's an old adage, maxim, whatever you want to call it, in terms of like emergency response. You've got to take care of yourself first, right? You can't help anybody if you get hurt or injured when you're doing that. And so it's the same kind of a thing when you're running a company, or frankly, if you're running a family. What's valuable to you? What's important to you? How do you prioritize that, right? Because if you think about it, when we talk about a value proposition, and again, this is talking about that. It's just not using that language. We talk about a value proposition. It's what problem are you solving? Do you need to solve? Are you trying to solve? What value do you create solving that problem? And what's the impact of that solution? Let's use different words. What are we focusing on? What's the priority of focusing on that? And how's it going to work?
Yeah. Now, Mike, I have a question.
You've got to have that internally.
I have a question for you, for both internally and externally, what your value is. A lot of people, myself included, I gravitate right towards, well, this can save people time. But I feel like that can be like a rat hole, right? Like you really have to define that more than this just saves you time. How do you do that effectively?
So there's two answers. First is, if the answer is it saves time, the best thing you can do is say, Cool. How much time? Right? Because one of the things that we get lost on a little bit is like we'll look at, for example, impact, and we'll say, oh, that'll save you time. Cool. Well, how much? Like a minute a day? Probably not a good investment. Simplest way to do it is you do a time audit. And if people aren't familiar with this, simplest way to figure out what an hour of time is worth, take your salary. And if you're self-employed or you're working in a startup, take how much money, if you'd like to get paid, take how much money you actually paid yourself, whatever, ballpark stuff. So let's just say, because I like simple math, it's $100,000 a year. Take that number, lop the last 3 off, so you got down to 100, divide it by 2. Your time is worth $50 an hour. Now, I don't mean you're worth $50 an hour. I don't even mean that you need to go charge 50 an hour or 100 an hour. There's pricing strategies and stuff are different. But what I'm saying is, if you're trying to understand how much time something saves you and if that's valuable or not, then if you look at it and you say, okay, if I do this manually or our current process, this takes 10 hours. If I invest a week of time into that, 40 hours, I'm going to knock this thing that we do every week, I'm going to knock it down to an hour. Well, that's huge savings. That's big times difference. And I'll give you an example of where I've seen this work internally, and this matters. So if you're a security startup today, in fact, one of the things that I've seen a lot is people will say to me, "Oh, this is security. We can't do value, Michael." Okay, A, you can. In fact, B, you have to. And C, I think, Paul, you've pointed out one of the simplest ways to take a look at it. If you've got a security team today, and this is a real life example, the numbers are a little obfuscated, and the timing. This is within the last 2 or 3 years. I want to say they had like 8 people on their team, right? So it's a Fortune 500 company. 8 people. Their whole job's chasing down. I'll say false positive, but they're chasing down alerts. That was their whole job, right? So they're
digging.
responders.
I referenced it at an enterprise security week this week, and I called it digging. Right? They're digging. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
And we love to dig as security professionals. We love to dig. It's awesome.
Well, so what was interesting was I asked what percentage of the digging results in a finding versus false positive. And it took them a week or two. They came back and they said, it's looking like 85% of this is false positives. I said, great. So how many hours is this equating to on a per year basis? And they did the standard, I don't know. I said, no, let's go add it up.
Yeah.
So we added it up. And then I said, okay, what's the loaded cost of your team? Same thing. And so we just did quick back of the envelope calculation. Turned out they were wasting about $750,000 per year on false positives. And so what happens then is when you look at that in the context of 1 or 2 of these solutions that you're looking for, if you do a proof of concept and that solution cuts that number in half, so let's say it cuts it down to $300,000 or less, and PS, the solution's only $200,000 a year, it's paid for itself in the first year.
Right.
Good deal. Totally should take a look at that. So that's the simplest, crudest way to do it. Figure out how long it's taking you to do something, determine whether it's characteristic or not. If it is, assign a time value to it. Doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need a big calculated spreadsheet. It takes, 30 seconds? And if you've got 5 people doing that, figure out what the average cost is, add it up, boom, there you go. That's what it costs. Now, second answer. And maybe we can do this on a show sometime, but I developed a tool I call the 5 lenses of value. Basically what you do is, in 3 of them are really simple. There's 2 that play big, and they play big in security and other stuff. I'll go through them real quick. First one is, does this help me make more money? Second one, does it help me save money? In this case, could be time. Does it improve our efficiency or our capabilities, right? So I used to say efficacy, but that's kind of a fancy word. So we just say, does it make us better at what we're trying to do? The 4th and the 5th ones. Now, those, by the way, are pretty standard. The 4th and the 5th ones. 4th one, does it let me make a better decision faster? And specifically in security, do I make better risk decisions faster? Speed matters, especially when it comes to response being decisive. The 5th one is, does it increase our resilience? And I don't mean just, oh, yeah, it's like redundancy, and then I got online backups, and I got back. No. I mean, sure, fine, you can make that argument. But I'm looking at this notion of resiliency overall, and I'm noticing, by the way, right, and I've had these now for about a decade, the concept of resilience is really building up. Now, here's the thing. Take each of those, and then you use 3 apertures. One is an emotional aperture, and I always start there. Then you can use a logical aperture, and then you use a financial aperture. So the idea is, if you say to me, oh, it's going to help us make money, first thing I want is how, right? Emotionally, how does this make money? Like, what kind of money are we talking about? Like, get me excited about it emotionally. No matter what anybody tells you, all decisions are emotional decisions. And you've got to get an emotional component in there. And that's something we don't do well in security. We just assume people know, or we just assume they're going to predicate the facts. And if I give you the facts, you will make a good decision because I gave you facts. It doesn't work that way. But then do back it up with logic. And then if you can, throw some numbers on it. And you can do that across each of those 5 lenses that I just gave you, which means you've got 15 different ways to negotiate out value. And if you start working through that exercise, and I'll tell you right now, it's uncomfortable every time you go through it, till you go through it about a dozen times. And then you start to get the hang of it. And then all of a sudden, you can see value in everything and everywhere. And you can determine it quickly, and you can put dollar values to it. And, we asked Matt last week, why do you think people are struggling with value so much? And that's the answer. The answer is because they've never gone through it, because we've bought into this mythology that you can't have value, or that value means it's a return on investment. And it doesn't mean that. And so so if we break it down simpler, that's how we do it. So the short answer is, if you can show me it's time and you can add $1 assigned to it, you can knock it out in a couple minutes. I find most people, once I introduce them to lenses of value and we find a clearly defined problem and we work through it, it takes anywhere from 45 minutes to a day to like really get through it and feel comfortable with it. If you're going to share it with other people, you need to document it and let them fix your assumptions. But the beauty is, if you get in the habit of doing that, you get a lot better at it.
I like that. I think that's a great snippet right there for startups, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm gonna do more around it. I'll tell you. It's kind of fascinating too. Is as I've looked at it more and more, the reason you have to address what problem you're trying to solve before you look at the value you create is because value is subjective. Value is positional. Value does shift and change. And so if you haven't properly defined for me the problem, which includes elevating it, meaning it's a problem I have, and demonstrating to me that you understand the consequences, and I agree with that, right? So what you want to hear is that language where they go, that's right. Oh, yeah, you got it. Yeah, when you get that, then you're good. And then when you present the solution, and here's the other trick to this, the solution to the problem is simply the inverse of however you elevated it. So when you elevate it, the best way to do it is ask a question. And it's got to be simple. If it's really compound, well, then it's too big for our brains to process. When you elevate it, right, when you isolate it, elevate it properly, you talk about those consequences, then the solution is just the inverse. That's it. It's not your process. It's not your secret sauce. It's not all your features. It's just the outcome. The solution is the outcome. Well, once you've got that, then you can map value to it. If you don't have that, that's why value gets so elusive, because there's no clarity. So it's might as well throw darts at a wall.
And it's a great tie-in to the article on your customer journey mapping, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to define your value first, but then working for a security vendor for as long as I did, I really thought about like what was the customer journey, right? Like what was the initial phases to get the product in, what experiences would they have, how would they use it, how would they benefit, and then how would they grow with the product and how would it help them? Like all of those things, certainly factored in. And I spoke to a lot of customers on different points in the journey, which gave me some great insights into that. I couldn't by any stretch write the article like this, but I think it's a good talking point.
I think this is one of the best articles I've seen on journey mapping in a really long time. And we will continue to talk about things like funnels and journeys and other stuff. And what's always interesting, and I'm seeing a new trend now where it's like, and here's how to personalize it. Somebody else, and this is not new research, pointed out recently that there's no single journey, and I completely agree with that. And yet, it's kind of like when we talk about leadership or we talk about straight talk. Does everybody have to approach it always the same way? No. Are there some universal truths to it? Mm-hmm. If you understand those universal truths, then you can help people calibrate where they are better, and you can get them where they want to be better. This was an absolutely fantastic piece. This is, like I said, one of the best I've seen. But let me tell you something else I really liked about it. You start internally. I think that's so important. You start. In fact, I'm working with a client on this right now, and we're a little more like we're looking at how do we translate the value prop into understanding. So what we've had to do is say, okay, what's the overall value prop of the organization look like? What's the value prop for this particular solution? And who's our target profile? And as we're going through that, we are doing most of this work internally. And it's great because people know the answers and they love being part of it. And we're using a structure. I know that surprises anybody listening to me. So as we're doing this, but what I really liked about this was it said, hey, start early and then put some assumptions together and let everybody participate in it. Like, let them talk about their experience. Let them get that out. Let them talk about what they think and then ask why. I love asking Why? And what you'll find is you've got people on your team that have had really good, intimate conversations with folks or have really thought these things through. What fantastic resources. And then go talk to people. It says, and I'll tell you, there's two I really like. Customer interviews, direct observation, contextual inquiry. I'm a big fan of direct observation. And I love this. By the way, this works great if you're in security today. So you're one of our buyers. You're one of the consumers of this innovation that we talk about. If somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, can I shadow you for a little bit?" Please say yes. I mean, sign the NDAs, get the legal team happy. I get all that. I really do. But let somebody watch how you do your job. And I promise you, you'll learn more in the process, as will they. But if you're on that other side, go ask people how they do their jobs. But keep in mind, and Paul, we've talked about this across all our programs. If I come to you and I put a microphone in your face and I say, "Paul, there's a big breach. What do you think about that?" Most people will go, "Oh, that's bad. Oh, I'm not going to shop there anymore." We know that's not true.
Yeah.
So if I just come and I say, "So what did you, this, I'm not even recording it. Turn that button off. Okay, so why did you, I'm not saying you don't get good information. What I'm saying is, if you take an interview and you use that to validate some of the points, and then you can get a way to go work alongside somebody or to observe them or to be on site with them, wow, big difference in terms of how it works. And then you get to go put it together. And, I've also found, and I've talked about this before, maybe I should write about it. I don't think there's any shame in having a journey, and I don't think there's any shame in putting the journey out there and saying to somebody, we tend to find our customers need to know these things before they work with us. Where are you at? What do you know?
Your potential customers, this is one of the burning questions on their mind is, what's my journey going to be like? What have other customers experienced on the journey? You get maybe not that direct question, but certainly questions that lead to like, hey, what's my journey going to be like?
Yeah. And if we start to understand that this isn't about rigidity, but it's about understanding that experience at each of those steps and then validating that we're giving the experience that we're expecting to get the results that our clients want, then if somebody comes and says, "No, I'm different," okay, cool. How? Where are you at? How does this fit? What would you like to do? And you'll get there. Now, there's a risk to that too. But anyway, I think this is good. And what's beautiful of this is it works internally too. This works for small startups. It works for large startups. It works for new projects. Actually, this really works for new projects, and go think about it. But a lot of times in security, the reason we struggle to get traction today is because take the last article. I'm not really sure the value we're doing. I've created no excitement around it. I'm not showing them how I'm solving a problem. And what's the journey of working with you as a security team today? What's that like? And you turn that lens around. Ooh,
the important part of a journey is to not stop believing.
Yeah. There you go.
I had to put at least one reference in there, Michael.
That was good. It was good. I'm only embarrassed that I didn't think of it first. That's good stuff. That's really good. All right. Well, since I brought it up, protecting trade secrets. I'm one of those weird people that's always geeked out on the legal side of stuff. Didn't go to law school, don't plan to go to law school. I'm clearly not offering legal advice, but I was always fascinated about the difference between things like copyright and trademarks and trade secrets. And, it's for years, people have always said, like if you test somebody and you'll say, what do you think's more important to Coke, the formula for Coke or their marketing plan for the next 3 years?
Or their process for creating it too could also be thrown in the mix.
Yeah, and people go, "Oh, it's clearly the formula." Yeah, no, actually, any chemist will tell you exactly what's in Coke and what's exactly in Pepsi and what the difference of the two is. No, what they're more interested in is their trade secrets. It's their go-to-market. It's their internal research. It's their customer list. It's who they've got partners with. It's the discounts they've offered to people. Those are trade secrets. So what starts to happen is when you look at it, if you have a patent, for example, right, and this is cursory stuff that we used to do right back in our days of the CSSP class, and I think a lot of us in security have maybe not paid as much attention to this. So this is good, again, if you're a startup, but it's also great if you're in an organization today. Intellectual property and the way we protect it's really becoming important. Of course, you say IP. What does that mean? Patents are great because when you have a patent, what it means is that you have a legally enforceable right to go practice your invention. It means that you're disclosing it. You're saying to the world, this is how it works, but only I can do it exclusively. And usually what that means is you can get money for your invention. And I use invention broadly. When you have a copyright means that expression of an idea. Having an idea, good for you. Expressing the idea is what gets you the copyright. So taking the picture,
Right.
writing it down, doing things like that, that's what makes it copywritten. When you talk about a trade secret, then
Or
trade secrets are kind of interesting.
Do trademark next, because I think a lot of people don't. And your definitions for patent and copyright were absolutely spot on, Michael. So
Thanks.
complete the trifecta with trademark.
A trademark is you don't necessarily have to register it. But when you register it and you have a trademark, what you're saying is it's something that you associate with your name. What people don't realize about trademarks is that you have to defend them rigorously.
And an important point with a trademark is it's associated with doing business. Associated
Correct.
with your business, right?
With your business, yeah.
Because that's in the name, like
trade,
right? You're doing business under a certain mark, essentially.
Yep. Now you can trademark a phrase. You can trademark a color. John Deere green is trademarked.
Yep.
Caterpillar yellow is trademarked.
Right.
There are some fire engine reds that are actually trademarked. The very specific shading of them and that type of thing. But when you think about trademarks, then Xerox, and I always forget. Like we use like Xerox, we use Kleenex. Xerox, for a long time, people used to say, "Oh, go Xerox that." Oh, just make. And you'll notice, by the way, people don't say that. What do they say? Copy it.
Yeah.
And that's because Xerox spent a lot of money protecting their trademark. If you don't have a Xerox, you're just making copies. And Kleenex, on the other hand. We always call it Kleenex. It's a facial tissue. No, it's Kleenex. They lost it. AOL, you've got mail. I'm pretty sure that got blown out as well as trademarks. So you can lose your trademark if other people start to use it. And that's one of those double-edged swords, because if you become part of the language,
yes,
are you really losing out? I don't know. Depends.
Yeah, probably not.
All right. So then when you get to trade secrets are those things that you need in order to advance your business. And so it gives some lists here. In fact, what it specifically says is, here's what people are likely to steal of yours: your email lists, non-financial business information, customer contact list, employee records, financial information. And so the thing is, these matter. I'll tell you the story that I remember from college. I took a con law class. It was a restaurant, a lunchtime restaurant, and they were known for their macaroni and cheese. That's if you went there, and this is like case law out of the 80s. The recipe for the macaroni and cheese was up on the wall in the kitchen. One of the head cooks, or chefs, however you want to say it, had a disagreement with the owner, opened up shop, literally same block, physically 3 doors down, started making macaroni and cheese, undercut the price. And the original owner of the macaroni and cheese, took the chef to court and said, "You stole my trade secret." How do you think the court ruled?
They deemed it not a trade secret.
Exactly correct. Do you know why? Because he posted it up on the wall. And they said, who had access to that? And he said, well, I mean, all the delivery people, plus all of the employees, plus all the bus boys and waiters and wait staff, and plus all this. And he said, yeah, so you didn't protect it. You did not give that trade secret status. Now, I'll give you a different example. When I was in college, I worked at a barbecue place, smokers, the whole bit, like cut down his own wood to smoke. There were only 2 employees that knew the recipe. And when they did their marinades and their rubs and they got everything ready to smoke it, the 2 of them would go in, lock all the doors. They'd be in the kitchen. They went in at like 4 a.m, and 2 hours later they'd come out. It wasn't written down. Nobody else had access to it. And this guy was like childhood friend, had grown up, blood brothers type of thing. That's trade secret. That's how you protect it. So what happens then is, what they're saying here is, and this is kind of interesting, because where this particular article went a little bit is it said, look, a lot of people are going to feel entitled to the information, especially in knowledge work. I've cultivated that list. That's my blood, sweat, and tears. I helped get those customers. Those are mine. And we all know that a lot of people, when they leave, they take the documents they worked on. They take the list that they helped develop. They take their email contacts. And to be blunt, it's a pretty not gray area, although it's treated as a gray area in terms of what's yours and what's the company's. And so the real point to this is, if you have something that is a trade secret, and it shouldn't be disclosed, then you need to protect that. And the simplest way to protect it, don't disclose it. But then it's going to be things like have an NDA. And by the way, for NDAs, I've read a lot of them over the years. I love this new trend of mutual NDAs, of protecting both sides to it, et cetera. And they're good to have. You don't see a lot of people going to court over NDAs. You don't see a lot of it.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. You're setting an expectation. That's all you're doing. You're having that conversation. So just if you think of the NDA as that construct to say, I'm going to protect what's important to you, you're going to protect what's important to me, and therefore we can freely disclose this to each other. That's great. The other things you need to do then, and this I agree, is you've got to use warning labels. If you've got something that's a trade secret, you've got to mark it as a trade secret. And if you're going to share it with somebody, it needs to be marked. You need to say to them, this is a trade secret. So even if you have an NDA with somebody, it's great practice to say, this conversation we're going to have, that's going to be protected under our NDA. I'm going to share some trade secrets with you. If you send them an email or whatever. Now, if it's really important, you maybe should use some encryption or think about it. But I mean, you don't have to. You need to use whatever's reasonable relative to the value of whatever you have. And so I'm going to say that there's a second part to this that this article doesn't really cover. There's a lot of startups, and we've touched on this lightly about people making pitches like, I won't even give you the pitch until you give me an NDA. I'm going to stay in stealth mode so nobody else can steal my idea. Yeah, it's nuts. Stop. Just knock that off. This whole everything I do is a trade secret. No. Like what I took out of this is, wow, you've got to think about this and you got to be tight with it. At the same time, don't be obsessed. Like, don't be too obsessed about it. Don't think that everything you've got is a trade secret. Be really clear on what is and what isn't, and then be good to go. And for what it's worth, on the side of my fence, now I always protect everybody. I honor all these obligations. I honor embargoes. Somebody sends me a note, hey, we'd love to give you a briefing. Will you honor the embargo? Yeah, of course. I think, like, if you're in security, this is a no-brainer. But that said, that's why I'm willing to give most of my stuff away. I've come down on the other side to it. And a lot of people have said stuff to me like, well, how are you going to protect that? Man, you got a lot of really good IP there. So I give it away. Marshall Goldsmith does this, and I think he's probably one of the best leadership people of our time. And he gives most of it away. P.S. He's retained by some of the world's best CEOs to come in and help them. They're not retaining him because of his intellectual property. They're retaining him because of what he's able to do, how he's able to apply it. And so although I'm not yet at his level, and I'm still happy to create courses and stuff, a lot of the things that underpin the stuff that I do make freely available. And to be fair, I've been told a couple times that I make too much of it freely available, and I'm always willing to take a look at that. I think people might be right, but it's just that's the way it goes.
Let's talk about one of my favorite companies, Bottle Breacher. They have 35 employees. It doesn't say what their revenue is based on a bottle opener, which I just think is amazing. And I think it's a cool product, and I own one, so I have a lot
based on a bottle opener, made out of a 50 cal ammunition shell. So it's kind of cool. So let's ask the important thing: how does it work?
Oh, it works awesome, and like I said, it's a conversation piece as well, so it's double bonus.
Yeah, so that's really kind of cool. Well, so what's interesting about it is, they talked about it I grabbed this mostly just because of you, and because we've talked about it, because you saw it. Now, were they on Shark Tank? Is that where you saw them? Yeah. So, when we talk about is Shark Tank worth it, let's go ahead and say, yes, it is. But what's interesting is, they said, okay, we're good. We're going to go do this. He got out of the SEALs, and he's focused on this. And you'll notice, or maybe you haven't, there's a lot of former SEALs that are writing business books, that are getting on the leadership circuit, that are looking at it, and they're crushing it. And what everybody always looks at with the SEALs is the rigorous physical training. And what we set aside is that I've read some accounts that the typical Navy SEAL today, there's about $3 million in training spent on them before they go to the battlefield. What people overlook is that our Department of Defense has spent hundreds of millions of dollars studying brain science. Yeah. And what we load up with a lot of our top warriors today is a deep understanding of the brain and of fear and of discipline and how to push through it. And as you and I have talked about a lot of times in this journey that we call entrepreneurship, you got some awesome days and you got some days where you're just going to hang your head and cry. And I think the SEALs have a lot to teach us in that regard. Now, this is essentially a pitch for saying, hey, by the way, we use Google. But what I wanted to point out that I thought was interesting is that, okay, we're out there, we're doing this. So, yeah, we went with AdWords. But then he said, this is how we're reaching customers we normally wouldn't. We're using Google Analytics to measure the web traffic. We're honing our marketing campaigns. We're identifying prime shopping times. Shopping times, sorry, and they're really trying to dial it in, and I think that that's so essential for something like this. I don't even know what that cost, but this is what, $20, somewhere in that range, probably.
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
It was a gift. Yeah, I
think it was a gift. Yeah.
So, but so the point to it is, what they've learned is how to extend that. And so they took something, and instead of just being like a nifty gag gift that goes around once, there's still an appeal for it. So they've gone and they said, okay, who's our target market? How are we going to analyze it? And then they're using something like Google. I think you could sub in here Facebook, and they're really honing who that audience is. They're targeting, they're retargeting them. They know when they're likely to be looking for these things. Yeah, it's the power of data. But if you think about everything else we've talked about, because like, again, what problem are you trying to solve? They're not trying to solve the problem of how to open up your beer. They're trying to solve the problem of maybe how do you start a unique conversation, or they're trying to do something else around it. But what they figured out is to keep that going, they've got to go appeal to people, and they're dialing it in, and they're looking at what's working, and they're using the analytics. It's all evidence-based. And they're getting,
in terms of trade secrets, there's not too many for a bottle breacher, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a 50 caliber bullet. It's a bottle opener. Anyone can go copy it. Standard parts, not the trade secret. The trade secret very well may be how they're using Google AdWords and Google Analytics. And as you and I both know, Michael, that can be a slippery slope. And I bet you they made some mistakes along the way that cost them some money until they figured out exactly what did work.
Yeah, and what's important about that is that I think you're probably right, and that means that they probably learned from that, right? Like, so do you remember? Because did they get funded on Shark Tank? I didn't look it up before this.
I don't remember. I don't think
my instinct is no. My instinct is people were like, yeah, that's a good idea. I don't know if that's going to work or not. And by the way, since they don't talk about numbers or anything else here, let's take a look at this. We have somebody that fought for our country and then said, hey, I've got an idea here. Figured out that it worked. Got themselves on national television, got enough sales to crash their website, and then said, hey, there's a real opportunity here. Let's go focus on this. And as a husband and wife team, executed it. And I'm fortunate. Trisha is my partner in our business and brings a lot to it. And I love that. Like, I know a lot of people can't imagine working with their spouse, but for me, I can't imagine not. And so I look at their story and go, it doesn't matter to me whether they're making $1 million or $100 million. They're kicking ass and taking names, and they're doing a great job with it. But you can see they're staying very focused. They understand their numbers, and they're constantly innovating, adapting, and learning from it. There you go, kick ass. That's pretty solid. Plus you like it, and I'm going to have to get one at some point.
Absolutely. All right.
By the way, they got 35 employees, so they can't be doing that bad.
Yeah. We got one more.
So there's two, but we'll just touch one quick. Here's the two. Why entrepreneurs need to keep their businesses focused. And I'm just, that's the one I'm going to pick. The other one we'll either come back to or not. And if you read nothing else, just go to the first point. Quantify one problem to highlight your solution. Yep. By the way, that would even fit into the other one was you need to know what your customers value. So we already talked about that enough today in terms of journey and stuff. But let me come back to this and why this matters so much. My favorite question is absolutely what problem are we trying to solve? And I've been asking it more and more. And now when we start looking at some of these companies, when we do our updates, we're going to start looking at their websites, Paul, you and me, and we're going to figure out how quick we can figure that out. Here's what I'm starting to find. And people have heard me say this a long time. If everything's a priority, nothing is. If you solve all the problems, frankly, you solve none of the problems. And even if the person that you're trying to approach has 3 big problems, right? Everybody knows I love 3s and 5s. So if you got to go to 5, go to 5. But pick one. Pick one problem, quantify that problem, understand that problem. What we'll talk about, and I'm really excited about an interview we've got coming up later this month. We're going to talk about point of view. We're going to talk about falling in love with the problem, not your solution. Getting people excited that you can solve that problem, but not your solution. It's the problem. Understand the problem. Pick one problem. I don't care if they've got 10. Pick one. pick the one you think they're most likely to resonate with. And then as you go through it, pick a market segment. It's kind of fascinating, but now that we've been doing this for almost a year, and obviously we've been doing our own things longer, but really focusing on talking to it. Paul, the interviews that stand out to me and the companies that I see doing the most success and the companies that I see making it to subsequent rounds, you know what they did in the beginning? One problem, one focus, one target market, one ideal buyer. They didn't have 5. They had 1. Because you know what happens if you've got 5 different buyers and you've got 5 different ways to explain your solution across 3 different problems? You just created a map of like 30 different things you've got to be really clean and clear on that don't create any confusion. And I think that the biggest lesson that I've learned over the last year for me is focus. And as we've tracked our journeys, I've gotten progressively more focused on what we do, what people need, how I can help, where I can focus. And it's working. And not only is it working, I'm calmer. I'm sleeping better at night. I'm taking weekends off. So, I think that really works. The other thing here that I like, pick a business model that you can best support. And in fact, you and I talk about this a lot offline. Like, how do you run a business and how do you do subscription pricing? Do you need to do a subscription? Let's talk about, whether we're ad supported and vendor, and sponsored, or do we charge people for access to something? Do we look at, and here's the answer. What do you know? What are you comfortable with? What works? Do that. There's no right way to do it. Pick one that that you're comfortable with and execute. Do it really well. So I thought that was really interesting in taking a look at it. The other thing I would find too, actually, now that I'm kind of going through this again, realistically characterize the competition. I got to tell you, because I figured it out. I'm taking well over 100 pitches a year. The number of times somebody tells me, we're the only one. No, stop. No. Well, the other people don't. No, also stop. like trying to differentiate yourself as we only, they don't. No, don't. If you're going to talk about competition in space, talk about it realistically. You're not everybody's cup of tea. So talk about the problem. Talk about the value that you're going to create. Talk about your impact. That's where you differentiate yourself. What's it going to be like to work with you? What's the experience like? Are you going to increase friction, which means you're going to blow trust and destroy value and burn my people out? Or are you going to elevate? And are you a force multiplier? You're going to help us. Good. That's it. So, just be careful when you talk about the competition that you don't characterize them too much that they become a cartoon.
Just on Bottle Breacher, they got a combined offer from Mark and Kevin of $150,000 in exchange for 20% of the company. They increased their sales since then in 2017 from $300,000 to up to a value of $2.5 million per year.
That's impressive. That's
pretty
respectable.
Yep.
And go Mr. Wonderful.
Yes.
So.
Alrighty, with that, we're going to take a short break, come back, and talk about startup and security notes of interest. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.